Hi everyone, it's Dr. Andrew Orr here, and I'm coming on today as part of Endometriosis Awareness, but it's also lined up with World Pride Month, which is really good. And as usual, I always try and talk about the topics that no one else wants to talk about, and which are important too. So I have brought on the amazing Dimitiri to talk me through this. So it's two homies talking about things, and I actually wanted to bring more attention to, I suppose, the LBGTIA, is it now, Dimitri? I think it's that. Is there any more acronyms that I missed?
I think it might be LGBTIQA plus. I think it's
Yes,
LGBTIQA plus. Yeah. Hi.
plus. Wow. Okay. So yeah, so I wanted to bring attention because one of the things I've seen more and more online, which I've actually spoken to you about, is that we have people now who are menstruating but may not identify as being female. And I think it's important to talk about it, especially even young people now that may be questioning or questioning not only who they are as a person, but who they are all as gender, sexually, the whole lot, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Um, so what I suppose one of the things I wanted to talk, because when I go online a lot of people often think that when I'm talking about and say menstruating persons, that it's taking away from females, but it's not doing that at all, is it?
No, it's just an inclusive way to talk to anybody who's menstruating, because there's people that maybe were assigned female at birth, but then they decided that that gender doesn't really suit them, and so they might decide to be gender queer or to transition their gender. And that can happen either they can transition their gender just in their life, or they can also medically transition their gender. So being
That's it.
saying persons is just inclusive of everybody who is menstruating.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you talking about this once before about the issue with chest feeding compared to breastfeeding, and
Hmm.
how it's important to ask a person, how would you like me to refer to it? Because it's important that we are inclusive of all those sort of things.
It can make a really big difference to mental health. Like, so I'm a trans man. I transitioned my gender maybe about 7 years ago, but it was really 17 years ago that I transitioned my gender amongst my family and my friends. And that's actually where I met you, Andrew, when I was trying to get pregnant with my daughter. And at the time, I was living as a trans man, but without taking hormones. So I was still menstruating. Of course, I was able to get pregnant, and then I was able to feed my baby. And for my mental health, it was really important that the people around me called it chest feeding rather than breastfeeding, because that I had a lot of gender dysmorphia around that body dysmorphia around that time, and that was actually really hard for my mental health, but also amazing for my baby. So I think it's important to be inclusive around what language people want to use to describe their body and describe the things that their body does.
Yeah, and that's it. It's your body, isn't it? And it's not taking away from the, women that identify as she. It's not taking away of that at all, but it's also saying, well, yes, you can say that as well, but I like to be included as well. So yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
it's interesting because we don't often we talk about, especially with endometriosis awareness, about the mental health side of things, which is often gets swept under the carpet. But let's remember, especially the LBGTIQIA plus community, they probably suffer a lot of more mental health issues, especially with segregation and questioning and all a matter of things. So did you did you go through a lot of that, like growing up, or?
uh yeah, definitely. Like, I don't think people realize the impact of, like, being labeled the wrong way,
Mm,
what that impact can have on your mental health. Like, it can just be like I don't know, like one person saying something and it just like ruins your whole day, or even can spiral you for longer than that as well. I think it's just people's choice of what they want to be called. So I think it's important to be able to acknowledge and to validate that for them.
Yeah. And it's not like you wake up one morning and go, oh, by the way, I'm just going to become a man. There's obviously a process in that.
It would be great if you could.
I want the mustache. I can't even grow one like that. But it would be, but then for you, because a lot of people say to me, oh, men can't have endometriosis, men can't menstruate, but that's not true. Or males can't menstruate. Correct. Just keep correcting me if I say the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think that would be true. I mean, people identify with, they choose their own pronouns. So, it's very possible that somebody who could identify as he or him, body's designed, in some ways to menstruate. So yeah, that's could be menstruating for sure.
Yeah. The other thing that I think even sometimes for me is that being a male in the women's health arena, I probably even need to change because I've got a women's health master's, but really now it needs to accommodate menstruating persons into it as well. But sometimes I get stones thrown at me too, saying no uterus, no comment. But I think that's a little bit, I don't know, there's a lot of that's, I don't know. As a male, I feel there's a bit of segregation there. But imagine if you were a person that now no longer has a uterus, but has previously menstruated. Surely you have a right to comment on things to do with women's health and being in transgender as well. So it's
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like I never want to take space away from women and women's spaces and women's right to be able to talk about their body. But yeah, I still have a uterus. I think I'll still continue to have a uterus until I die. I don't think it's something I'm going to be taking out. So yeah, I guess it is a tricky space to navigate, and I think times are changing, and so more of these conversations are yeah are tricky to talk about, but I think it's important to be having tricky conversations.
yeah, I think it is. I think one of the most tricky conversations I had with my youngest daughter one night, and we were talking about her stage where she said she was questioning, her sexuality, and I said, oh, okay, so if you're sort of one side or the other, or you're going with a female and a male, that's bisexual. And she, no, Dad, no, it's not called that anymore. It's open. And I'm like, what's open? And she started to go that. But these days we'd have different terms for it. But what she was trying to say is that she was open to anyone, regardless of their gender, who they associated with, like everything.
Yeah, I think that's called pansexual now.
Pansexual, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so these are all the terms. So what are some of the terms? Because sometimes I have to get out the Urban Dictionary. Like there's demisexual, there's pansexual, bisexual, asexual. How many more are there?
You're doing well. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I have to get out the Urban Dictionary too. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think as language changes, you
Yeah.
know, language changes anyway over time. So I think getting on board new language, is something that we have to do, especially as culture changes so fast now.
Yeah.
But I also, yeah, think it's important sometimes to remember privilege amongst some of that. Like I've had some conversations with some old transgender people who really associated themselves with the word tranny, but nowadays, that's seen to be a really derogatory term and is offensive to a lot of transgender people. But yeah, I don't know, like speaking with them and, recognizing the struggles that they'd been through, it was a lot harder for them than it has been for me. And, in a lot of ways, those women really paved the way for us. And yeah, I think it's important to, I don't know, be respectful when they decide to identify themselves in using that language.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you reckon, what could someone like as a parent, because let's get back to talking about periods. You would
Yeah.
have went through period. Did you have painful periods? Did you, what was that like for, did you back when you were menstruating, did you associate, like what did you associate with then? Did you associate more as female, or have you always associated as male? And how can we help people in maybe when they are questioning and moving into that sort of area where they might be questioning, they might be, looking at transgender? And forgive me again while I'm using the wrong terms.
No, that's okay. I didn't, I was quite late to the party, really. I didn't really transition amongst my family and friends until my 30s.
Oh, wow.
So for a lot of time before that, I did identify as a woman, a
Yeah,
butch woman and a lesbian woman. But yeah, I did identify as that. And my periods were painful.
yeah,
When I was having my daughter, there was, some questions over whether or not I had endometriosis. My fertility was really quite low. And, we were wondering if that was perhaps one of the reasons why I was having trouble falling pregnant and having why my egg count was so low and all those kind of things.
yeah.
Um, I don't know how to support, how, like as a parent, how would I support my child if they were transgender and menstruating? I think I'd just take the lead from them and ask them what they needed and what they wanted and how I could best support them,
Yeah.
I think.
And I think it's important, like if you were friends of someone that may be identifying as a male, that if they're sitting there with a heat pack and um, all the bits and pieces that come with a menstrual cycle, that, you've got to have compassion around that and support around that because they may be still menstruating unless they're taking hormones. So, um, yeah, it's interesting because we often get that, oh no, males can't have a period, but yes, they can. And they can have
Yeah,
endometriosis and all the other associated symptoms, and they can be moody and have PMS and they want the
yeah,
chocolate.
yeah, 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 and all the pain and all of that goes along with it too.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really important that we support around that and continue to support. But what for you now, you don't menstruate anymore. Is that
No, I don't. That was so when I started taking hormones, it just kind of like sort of pitted out and I had a bit of spotting for a while and then it stopped. So got to
how,
say I don't really miss it.
how did it feel going through, like from your perspective, like looking back like that, how did that feel going through that transition period, like of basically, yeah, well, it is transition, isn't it? It's, but how did you feel? Like it, how does it?
Yeah, it really is like a second like a what it like a second adolescence in a way. Like it's everything's changing and it changes really fast. You get a lot of high and low moods and like I don't know, it's a really I'd like to say, I want to say difficult time, but it was really exciting. The difficult part was the part up to the decision to transition medically for me. Like it was when I was in between, when I just transitioned with my friends and through having my daughter. um, that part was really hard because I was, walking between two like two worlds, I suppose. Like, and I didn't really feel confident in and transitioning across all of my life. So in my work life, I was still being, identified as female, and then with my family and friends as male. So I just really felt like this quite a big split between who I was and who my identity was and how I dressed, and did I need to dress a different way, and just I think yeah, the not feeling not accepted, and which toilet do I use, and the
Yeah.
language, and even names. I was using different names, and so that period was, I mean, yeah, it was difficult. It meant that I got to give birth to my daughter, which is, I always felt like I've been given this body that's felt wrong for me always, but at least I got to do the one thing that it's designed to do.
Yeah.
And in some ways, yeah, and because of that, I wouldn't want it any other way. That's been my greatest achievement, giving birth to her and raising her. um and so, but it was difficult. The chest feeding was difficult, carrying her was difficult, people naming my body wrong was really difficult.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of mental health problems, which was really hard. But then when I decided I was going to transition medically, it was like I wasn't thinking about it. And then someone prompted me and said, "Why haven't you transitioned?" And then I was like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do it." And then it was like 2 weeks later, I started my hormones, and it was just like boom, 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 boom. And everything just kind of, it just really felt like everything fell into place for me after that. And then I didn't have all of this energy that I was expending in, trying to make sure I was feeling okay. It was just about, moving forward from then. So, I
Mm.
mean, like, people decide to do all sorts of things, but for me, that was, the best decision I made.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to, and you just answered it, is that you've always felt that you don't belong in your form,
Yeah,
your physical form as
yeah.
you are. But now, how do you feel in this form?
Oh, I feel amazing. I just, yeah, for so long I've been struggling, and there's lots of research about how if you're gay or lesbian, or if your sexuality isn't normalized. I'm confusing myself with terms now. But if there's a lot of research about how that really creates like a backlog of your mental health while you're trying to deal with that, you can't really be moving forward. And so I just feel like finally everything has fallen into place for me now, and I'm finally moving forward and really kind of like thriving and kicking goals in a way that, like, I'm lucky to be sitting here actually. Like, there were quite a few times when I could easily have decided it's all too hard and not been here. And I think that's a real struggle for transgender people.
Yeah,
Um, Really,
absolutely.
yeah, it's challenging. So yeah, being able to medically transition and consolidate all of those parts of my identity, and I just don't have to spend energy on any of that stuff anymore. I am who I am, who I'm supposed to be, and now it's just about, moving forward from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it must be, yeah, I just, because coming from like a heterosexual male like myself, it's hard to think because I'm just a male. And you've probably always identified as a male in some way, um, even though you're in a female physical form. It would be so hard. I'm trying to get my head around it. Go, how would I be if I was in a body that I didn't want to be in?
Yeah. And it took me a long time to realize, that's what the feeling was. When I first came out as being a lesbian in my, like, late teens, I was like, oh, that's what this feeling is. And then it really took me another, 10 years to realize, oh no, there's something else that's happening underneath all of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I just, it was always my birthday wish. Since I can remember, I always felt like the wish that you have on your birthday when you blow out those candles is the strongest wish that you can have in the entire year. So my birthday wish was always that I'd wake up the next morning and I'd be a boy. But I never ever told anybody that. It was just, something that I kept inside, until my late 30s. So yeah, that's a lot to keep under wraps.
If you could go back and talk to yourself at that age, what would you say to yourself now?
Probably cliche, but it's going to be
Yeah.
all right. Just hang in there. You'll get there.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw as a saying this morning that I was actually going to put up. It says, don't judge me by my past because I'm not that person anymore.
Yeah.
Don't judge me by my yesterday, and because today's a new day, and you're certainly testimony to that. And having watched you go through and known you in those various stages, it's amazing, really. And as I
Yeah.
said, your mustache is way better than mine. I'll have to put the fake one on. Yeah, and the other part is like, how did people react? Because this is the whole thing. So you're going from a menstruating person into a male, and then how does everyone around you behave? Like, so you said you're in a lesbian relationship. Then how do partners, how do friends, how do everyone now look at you, even within your own community? Like it must be such, I don't know. How did you deal with that? Like because you've got to deal with a partner that might not accept you for now changing. Um, People in your community might not, well, they'll always accept you, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the reason why I didn't medically transition, in those 10 of years, because my partner at the time said, look, you're at the edges of my sexuality now. And if you transition your gender, I don't know if I'll be attracted to you. And that's just as honest as I can be. And that was the partner of my child, the partner who I had the child with. So I didn't want to lose that. So I didn't. I thought, oh, okay, I'll just stay here. This is good enough for me in this space in between genderqueer space. And then when we separated and I got a new partner sometime later, and she was like, why haven't you transitioned? And then, that was the reason. I was like, oh, that's right. That reason that I had, I don't have that anymore. And you're right. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. And my daughter, who was, I think she was like 3.5 at the time. And, she always knew about transgender from get-go. She understood what it was as much as you can when you're 3.5, I guess. And so when I said to her, look, I'm going to transition my gender, and so my voice will change, and my hair will grow differently, and she said, well, I don't want you to stop being my mum. And I said, well, I'm not going to stop being your mum. I don't have to stop being your mum. And so she said, I don't want to stop calling you mum. And I said, okay, well, that if that's what you want, then I'm okay with that. So she does call me her mum.
Yeah.
And so that bit is a bit tricky because people are like, what? And as she's in grade 4 now, so as she gets older, it sort of gets a little bit more challenging to keep using that language. And I'm sort of like waiting for the time when she sort of is like, oh, I don't need to use that anymore. Or we sort of more use parent now, like this is my parent. But yeah, that's a bit tricky. That part is tricky for her. Just only that bit. Yeah, the rest of it she's good with.
She's young, yeah, and
yeah, she's like 10 now, so yeah.
And how does it feel for
even
someone?
just recently I wrote something.
Oh no, go on. Yeah.
Keep going.
No, you keep going.
Oh, I was
You
going to
wrote
say I
something?
had to write something recent. I had to write something recently to her teacher, and I put her to say, "Mom," I was like, "Oh, sorry about that. Yes, okay, I'll change it."
It must be, yeah. Oh God, there's so much to think about. But how, say, and this is the reason why I asked you to come too. If someone is transition and they are going to start hormones and they're going to start losing their period, what what's some of the things you could say to those people, or what they would expect, or those around them that they might notice? Like you said, there could be changes in your voice will get a bit deeper, and your
Um,
periods will get lighter or stop.
yeah. Well, I think in the beginning, it's just like your hormones are just, changing so much. So, sometimes you get really teary and um actually that's an interesting thing after my transition, like there's that myth that like men don't cry,
Mm.
or like, all men keep it all together, but actually it's really hard to cry. It's like, before I would be upset and, I guess when you're menstruating or when you're premenstrual, you cry a lot or just are emotional about things. I don't really feel that anymore. Like sometimes I wish that I could have a good old cry because, it's like a release and you feel better and then you can pick yourself up and start again. But yeah, I can't, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've cried since my transition. And sometimes if I, feel a tear, slide out, I'll just like really try breathe into it and just sit with it because I want to be able to cry. But yeah, that's really something that's really different.
That's interesting. That is really interesting. I think that'll help some like heterosexual male too. They go, is that abnormal? Why am I feeling like that? But it may be just part of being a male.
Yeah, maybe the testosterone, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then how did your periods, like, how did it feel, like, period wise? Like, did it gradually stop, or did you go through months of still getting a period and then it was light, or did period pain get worse or less, or?
Um, I remember that there were like, yeah, I had definitely had some cramping, and some like strange cramping feeling that I hadn't, a bit different to how it had been before. And then it was just more sort of like a gradual spotting. And the doctors follow how your estrogen levels are going on blood tests. You have to have a lot of blood tests in the beginning. So, they were able to describe to me, oh, well, actually, yeah, your estrogen levels are coming down. And then they just kind of stopped. And so, yeah, now if I was to get spotting, it would mean that, something's wrong. And then I'd need to go to the doctor rather than,
Yeah.
you just sort of, before I would have just been like, oh, I'm spotting a little bit or something. But yeah, now it's like I need to go to the doctor if that happens now.
Yeah. And did you, because some people are needle phobic and all that kind of stuff, did you use more injections, or are now on oral testosterone, or um, what are you doing
Most
now?
people, for males, mostly people use injections. So I have to have an injection every 9 weeks. Um, Depending on people's bodies, that can swing from, I don't know, 7 to months, 3 months or something for some people.
Hmm.
Um, Another way, some males, maybe people that are more genderqueer, and have some friends that are genderqueer, and they use it like a testosterone gel. So they have a much smaller amount of testosterone that they and that's how they access hormones.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure for trans women. I think it's a patch, or maybe it's more orally.
Yeah.
I don't think they have needles, trans women.
Yeah, yeah, could use patches, like there's the testo gel patch, and then there's the estrogen patches, and
Estrogen patch, yeah, I think maybe that's what trans women use.
yeah, it's yeah, because it's really interesting, and that's why I wanted to sort of talk, about how you felt going through it, and also so that if you have transitioned to where you are now, if you ended up getting, I'm trying to use the right word, period pain, or you had spotting or abnormal bleeding, and say you had endometriosis, you're still going to have it. Um,
Mm,
and just to remember that in the back of your mind, that it could still be there, although the hormone therapy could probably really help it. But if you've got any abnormal changes, because you could still have, there's cancer risk still, there's cervical. So do you still have to have like your cervical smears and things like that?
I think so, but it's a bit different because you have to have like an oral, um, you have to have a little bit of estrogen, I think, and then you have to have a pap smear. I really probably I'll need to put that in my diary and check that out because I haven't thought about that for a while. I know some friends of mine who have transitioned, they have had really bad period pain. So I'm not like continuing pain in their cervix.
Yeah.
And a couple of them had to have their cervixes removed. So I'm not sure. Do you think that would be endometriosis?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. Or, they could have adenomyosis still if they still have a uterus intact. And, and you've also still got to worry about the cervical cancer risks and
Yeah.
which would be hard because you're sort not disassociated, but you've got to remember that that's still in there. I suppose that would be hard because I'd be thinking, well, no, I'm a male now. I don't need to worry about that. And then you go, oh, hang on, I've still got a uterus.
Yeah, I think so. Like I remember being a lot more attached to how often I'd had a pap smear. And I mean, I don't even think they send me the reminders anymore from the GP. It was always like, oh yeah, it's been, a year or 2 years or whatever. But yeah, I haven't really thought about that for a while.
Yeah, so it's interesting to remember that. And um, that must be hard. Is that hard though? Like having to go back to that, like, you know what I mean? Oh, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of the right word to say.
Yeah, I think for some people that would be really hard, like in terms of body dysmorphia and stuff like that, having to do that. I'm sure for some people, pap smears, I'm sure even for a lot of women, pap smears are really
Oh,
difficult,
so
and traumatic even. I think there'd be a lot of women who wouldn't, I mean, who enjoys a pap smear, right?
yeah, no. I remember once going overseas and having the equivalent to the male pap smear with a checking for all sorts of things and having a cotton bud shoved up my penis, and it was not fun. So I could imagine what a
No.
woman would feel like.
Yeah.
So the other thing I was going to ask is that do when you were talking about young children and you have a child, um, when did you start questioning? Is it young? Is it when you get to puberty, or has it been like ever since you can remember?
Yeah, ever since I can remember, I it just
Wow.
felt wrong for me. But it really took me a long time to come, I mean, I had the birthday wish, but apart from that, I really didn't think about it or think about that it could be possible to transition. It wasn't really until a friend of mine came back from the UK in my 30s, and she said, look, people are starting to really change language and ideas around gender, and you don't have to be binary male or female. There's a lot of people who are gender queer or just changing their pronouns or just changing their names. She was like, it's really amazing what's happening over there. And it takes a bit of time in Australia for us to catch up, but um, I think it's a really exciting time to be alive in terms of, I can't imagine feeling like this, even if I was 30 years younger. I think we're at a period of time where ideas and culture and stuff is changing really rapidly, which is really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I always say to my children. I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're white, black, what gender you're a person. If
Mm,
if I cut you, you bleed. We're all people, aren't we? And it
yeah,
shouldn't really matter who you identify. Well, it matters who you identify, but you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Um, as long as you're happy within yourself, that's all that matters. And now it seems like
yeah,
you've just blossomed.
yeah.
Okay, that's probably not the right word to use for a dude, but you've
Yeah, yeah. I think when your well-being is good, you know, everything leads on from that. If you're not well inside yourself, then how can anything possibly blossom?
yeah,
You need all the right things so that you can. And I think it's as a parent, you know, I and me and you as well. I mean, you just want your kids to be happy, whatever that means for them.
That's right. And someone said that to me once, that especially in the fertility space, because seeing you've been through it, that we get caught up with being mum or dad, but at the end of the day, once that child's born, you become a parent. You're not just mum or dad anymore. And some parents are mum and dad combined. Even I've been that as a
Mm,
single parent, being mum and dad. Um,
yeah,
so it's
yeah,
interesting
me
how
too.
everything. Yeah, you've been mum and dad, and just like you said, you're getting called mum still. It's yeah, I'm sure my kids call me mum every so often.
Well, you are a pretty good cook, Andrew.
Yes, well, I heard you're a pretty good cook too.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can hold my own.
You can hold your own, and DJ, and. Um, before I finish, I'd like to just thank you for coming on today to share your story, especially because we need more education around, especially in the transgender community. But for me too, as a heterosexual male or a heterosexual female, or as a parent, knowing and hearing your story, that this is where you are now. You're the most happiest I've ever seen you in your life. You're glowing.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I've never been better than what I am now.
Yeah, so it's not, and we really should be doing everything we can to support a person if they make that decision to transition, but also just keep them aware about menstrual health in the back of their mind if they keep their uterus. Um,
Yep.
and then
Yeah,
they
I'm gonna
can.
get my pap smear next week.
Yes, we want you here for the long haul. There's people that need you.
Yes, true.
Well, thank you very much, Dimitri, for coming on today. And hopefully I navigated through this all right. I think my daughters will be happy with it.
I think you did a great job, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. Thank you so much.